I began thinking about the military, mostly because a lot of my buddies had left high school. I graduated in '06, and a lot of them joined the Marines and went immediately overseas to the Middle East. And like, there's a part of me that just felt like a calling to go serve. And so I began thinking about it. And it was around this time that my mom, she was like, hey, you should talk to her best friend's 2 brothers. I knew they were in the military, and my mom was like, you should talk to them. They were both Navy SEALs. And I'm like, what? Like, we have family friends who are
that's
Navy
not like
SEALs?
a common thing. Like when someone says they're in the military, you don't think like.
Yeah.
And so they were retiring, and so I'm not going to give their names, but they were like very, very big deal Navy SEALs that served on SEAL Team 6, like the most big time, like big time.
What is SEAL Team 6?
I was never on Team 6, which is an important distinction for the people that understand how the teams work. I was on what's called a white side team. So all Navy SEALs go through, there's Navy boot camp, there's like a prep school, there's like effectively SEAL boot camp, which is another 6 months. There's all this advanced training. It takes about 2 years. And then you become a SEAL, but you're a white side Navy SEAL. And after you do 1 or sometimes 2 rotations, so work up and deployment, you can have an opportunity to basically go through a whole new screening process to potentially go to Team 6. And again, I've never done it, but from the people that I have very close friends that have gone over there that are there now, it is like Navy SEAL boot camp times infinity. Because now you're literally competing against other Navy SEALs who likely have combat experience, who know what they're doing. And on Team 6, it's a bigger deal than even I think most people even fully understand. Like, when America needs to do stuff, those are the people you ask to do it. And you can't fuck it up. You are like 100% successful. Otherwise, you're not allowed to be on that team.
They took out Osama, correct?
Oh, yeah.
That was Team 6?
Yeah. Basically, the highest profile, the highest stake stuff goes to that team. And so the screening process is otherworldly. Like, if you are not basically perfect, you don't get to be a part of the team. And so those dudes are like superheroes.
Is that something that they have to dedicate their life to? Like, I'd imagine having a family and like trying to raise kids, it would be almost impossible going through that sort of training with that, just being on call, I'd imagine 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, again, since I have not done it myself, this is very secondary, but from what I understand, they literally have like, beepers or something, and they're on call effectively. I don't know if it's literally beepers, but that is the idea. I mean, when there are operations that kick off that are super duper serious, a lot of times they're not necessarily known until very last minute. And so these operators are like constantly needing to be ready to execute insane stuff.
How many people are on that?
I actually don't know. It's a very small number. It's probably, if I'm in a ballpark, it's probably less than 100. They're actually operators. That's a complete made-up guess.
Yeah, sure.
I'm probably wrong. But it's not much more. Okay. I'm probably off, but it's a small number of people. And if you think about it, like, I think that in total at any given time, I want to say there's like either 2,000 or like 2,500 active duty Navy SEALs across all teams. That includes the white side teams. So, I mean, it's a small number of people to begin with. That's not many.
I thought it would be way more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small community. I mean, every year out in Coronado, California, where they do the initial training to become a SEAL, they run 5 classes a year, unless that's changed. And even though each class will graduate something like 50 people, which virtually all of them will go on to become SEALs, a lot of them are actually from other classes that they got rolled out of for injury, for failing something. And so it's not like those 50 people started with their class and finished. It's like over the course of the year, you have all these people that get hurt along the way that keep getting rolled or pushed around. And so like the true number of like new recruits that get through is relatively small each year. It's like a couple hundred people each year that get through it.
And when you meet Navy SEALs, is there a certain, like, even if you haven't met them in person, like a certain like eye contact or a bond that you immediately have? Now, I'm not comparing this to something that I've done, but I did run cross country in high school. Okay. And when people tell me, but it was
on the bowling league.
That's true. That's true.
When people tell me they've ran cross country, I'm like, okay, so you've pushed yourself to a limit, not like the limit, because you guys are like the limit, but a certain limit where you're like, okay, you're dying in a run, and then you push yourself even further. Like I feel like there's a certain like brotherhood there, but obviously nothing, not even 1% of what you experience, I'm guessing, with other SEALs.
I think that actually you're really not that far off. I understand that like there's this, even I just did it talking about Team 6, like you're constantly trying to make sure nobody thinks you're trying to misconstrue things here. Yeah. But I think ultimately all it is, when you become a Navy SEAL, really what you've done and what you've demonstrated is you're able to do what you just described, like hit barriers, mental, physical, whatever, and then keep going. And really, I do believe that virtually anyone can do that, but few people will do that. And so what you're describing is really the same phenomenon. That's like if you're someone that has pushed yourself beyond a certain boundary, and you see somebody else that you know in virtue of being a cross-country runner at a fairly high level, they've done the same thing, there's going to be a kinship there. There's going to be a connection. But definitely with Navy SEALs specifically, I mean, it's actually funny. I'll go to airports and I'll literally spot one, like, because SEALs are kind of all over the place. They're traveling a bunch. And I remember I was like at the airport in Atlanta, and I like spotted a dude from like, that's so crowded, super crowded terminal, and like across the heads of all these people. It was like a quick glance. Never met this guy in my life, but I knew immediately he was a Navy SEAL.
Wow.
I mean, I don't even know. But there's definitely like
it's got to be a posture, a body language.
There's definitely
like
something. There's also
How
specific
did you
clothes.
talk to him?
Oh yeah. And it's funny. I walked up to him and it wasn't like, "Are you?" It was like, "Hey dude, what team are you on?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm on this team." I'm like, "Cool man, good to
There's
see you."
no way.
I swear to God.
Did he know who you were?
Just he could tell that I also was a SEAL. Not that he
There's
knew me
this
personally.
certain perception. There's something that's like trained, I feel like, in the back of your brain while you're going through the academy, where you're like so perceptive of being in like public settings. I'm guessing also this translates to like, okay, like, is this a good guy, bad guy? Like, what's going on? Like, you know, you're walking through a grocery store and you're constantly like looking around. And is that a thing that you have?
Like hyper-vigilance? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have this.
Oh, yes.
So as you walked into this house, by the way, shout out to Caleb Hammer. This is his house. Thank you for letting us
Yeah,
use
thanks,
your
Caleb.
studio, Caleb. Were you like looking around and like being hyper observant of all of like everything in the house?
I mean, I'm not going to say I walked in and like literally identified every exit, but I definitely took the time to like poke my head around the corner and look around.
Is that a trained thing, or have you always been somewhat like that?
I definitely was not always like that. That's definitely more not even trained. It's more like, yeah, I guess trained is the word then, because definitely in training you're instructed to be super attentive to detail. In fact, that would be if I were to try to like sum up what your instructors through Navy SEAL training really try to emphasize. It's this whole, it's not, hey, push yourself beyond your borders or whatever. It's attention to detail in all things. Like it doesn't matter how tired you are, doesn't matter how complicated, how stressed you are, you must pay attention to details. Like you must. And even the slightest infraction will get you kicked out of training. Not literally every time, but that's the stakes they're playing
What is
with.
training like?
It's described as the best time you never want to have again. Because in many ways, when I look back at the 6-month long course, you go to boot camp. This is the pipeline for the enlisted side, anyways. So not to get complicated, but the bulk of people who become Navy SEALs, they enlist, so they're not commissioned officers. They're like the sled dogs. They're the workers of the team. You got to go through boot camp, which is just typical Navy boot camp. That's 2 months long. It's in Chicago. I don't know if it's changed, but when I went through, there was a mandatory preparatory school that you go to immediately after boot camp, where for 2 more months you stay in Chicago and you train with like literally professional athletes and coaches and Olympic athletes who have been brought in by the Navy to not like beat you up, but to like actually build up your strength, build up your confidence, because your next phase is actual like Navy SEAL boot camp. So you wrap up your two months in the prep school, and then they send you to Coronado, California, which is, it's so funny. It's like the most beautiful. Have you been to Coronado, California? Yeah. It's like the most stunningly beautiful place ever. And like in this like iconic, like idyllic place, there's like the most treacherous military training like ever taking place. And it's very public. You can like watch it. But you go out there and then you go through a few weeks of like what's called indoctrination, which is a few weeks of like, you're not technically in the training yet, but loads of people quit because you're actually working with Navy SEAL instructors and it's very intense. You know, you're being treated really like...
What's intense about it?
Well, one, you're there. You're at like this storied compound where like, by the way, where you train in Coronado is also where the West Coast SEAL teams are. And so you're like this pathetic, like have done nothing. And you wear a white shirt with your name stenciled on it that like signifies you're a recruit, you're nothing. And when you go to training, it's like you're literally surrounded by actual like active duty Navy SEAls that they just haze you. And it's like, so it's an intense place to be.
What's the hazing like?
It's mostly just like, you know, goofing around with you. Like they'll grab you and like make you come over and like give a speech to like they'll literally, hey, come over here, talk to these guys. And it's like 10 active duty Navy SEAls and they like, yeah, introduce yourself. And like you start talking and they start like cutting you off and making fun of you. It's like stupid stuff.
Sure.
But so it's an intense place to be. And then, I mean, just the actual training is incredibly difficult. physically. You know, it's like it's famously challenging. That's the whole point. They want it to be borderline impossible to do, so that if you are able to complete the training, you've demonstrated that you can kind of push beyond, you know, what most people would consider an impossible limit. So anyways, you do 6 months in Coronado. It's called Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL School, or BUDS for short. If you get through that, you're virtually guaranteed to become a SEAL. Like, the attrition rate falls to near 0 at that point. But you have another 6 months of advanced training, and then you go on to, like, we went to language school. Man fagat farsi harf bezanam.
No,
I can't. I can say that's the line I can say.
I was just about to say, I'm like, you know,
I can only speak
languages,
Farsi.
by the
Oh
way.
my gosh.
No, so but you go to like a follow-on school, and then you go to your team, and then you go through a whole workup again. So, but in terms of like the actual training, sleep deprivation is horrible. It's so bad.
What does that feel like?
I mean, you lose your mind. Like, really, you actually become an insane person. That's the gist. There's 1 week of training early on in actual BUDS. So the 6 months are broken up into 3 phases. The first phase is called first phase, and it's the gut check. It's a lot of soft sand running and laying in the ocean when it's freezing cold at night, and doing like 1 billion sit-ups and jumping jacks. You carry around this thing called an IBS. It's an inflatable boat, but it weighs like 200 some odd pounds, and you and your boat crew have to carry it on your head. And it's not that heavy. It isn't like you put it on your head and you're like, wow, that's so heavy. But you run everywhere with this boat, either by your side or on your head. Think about this: running on sand, it's uneven, and so the boat's jostling around, and it hits the top of your head so often that you actually develop a bald spot on your head. Guys like will break bones just from the compression of this boat on their head. Like, if you fall when you're in the middle of a run, this boat just comes colliding down on you. It's gnarly. Like, it's a gnarly thing. So yeah, but I'd say the worst part is sleep deprivation. And then there's a week early on in first phase called Hell Week, where you don't sleep for you sleep for a total of like 4 hours, broken up into little naps over the span of like 5.5 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a very physically grueling.
I am so curious, like, how well are they compensated afterwards as a Navy SEAL? Because going through that training, I mean, to be like the top 0.001%, I'd imagine it's got to be like a high pay. Or do people do it just because they love it?
If you look at like the entirety of like the enlisted ranks in the Navy, so all jobs, Navy SEALs, Seabees, whatever, you are the most well compensated for sure, but you're not well compensated. You can look it up. I think guys make like 50,000 gross, maybe 60,000 when they get to a team, which amongst like typical enlisted folks that go into if you show up to your first command as like an E2 or an E3, it's like an enlisted rank, the junior enlisted rank, you're making like, I don't even know, it's probably like $20,000 or $30,000 a year. And you obviously get like health benefits and all that stuff, but within the confines of what the Navy's actually able to give you, they pay SEALs, let's say, the best, but it's not like you're not making a lot of money. You're not at all. But then when you deploy, they pay you a whole bunch of money, but that's not really, and that's relative. It's not like a ton of money, but for the military, it's a good amount. You'll make like an extra, I don't even know. I mean, a couple $100.
10, 20 grand, maybe.
Shout out to my manager, Nick Witters, who's off screen. He was a combat vet as well.
Thanks,
Oh,
Nick.
nice.
So you get paid for deployments, and so if you deploy a bunch, you get more money. But yeah, it's definitely not something you would do for pay. I think that I think that a lot of people ultimately decide to be SEALs because of the challenge of becoming a SEAL. I tell people that when I ultimately made the decision to want to be a SEAL, it was shortly after my mom had said, "Hey, why don't you go meet up with our family friends here, the Navy SEALs?" And I met with them. It's a funny story, actually, how I met with them. I went to this place in New Hampshire where we were going to meet. And my mom's best friend, whose brothers these were, she has this camp in New Hampshire that's for kids. It's like an art camp. And it's beautiful. There's like little cabins. There's like a little lake. And it's this nice little area. And just up the road, there's this gravel access road that it leads up to this like ramshackle like plywood hut that's like not in any way like permitted. It's like a crappy like hut. And when I was told to meet with these two guys, they were doing like training out of this hut. So this is like the secret like backwoods training center for like tier 1 operators. And so I like go to this camp and I like go say hi to Susan, my mom's friend at like the camp. The kids were all running around like having their barbecues and coloring. And then I walk up the road like by myself to this shack, and it's shut. And I can hear inside like the sound of like, you know, intense alpha males like having some conversation like. And I just like open the door and walk in, and it's all these dudes that are like covered in tattoos, like super jacked, all sitting on like upturned buckets, and it's just like dirt on the ground. There's like no furniture or anything, and they're just like in a circle bullshitting with each other. And I walk in, and they immediately go silent, and all of them just turn, and they're like, "Who the fuck are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm John. I'm here to meet you guys." But it was incredible getting to meet. It was all Navy SEALs, and these were like active dudes who were like in between their rotation cycles. What was impressed upon me from all of them is this notion that Navy SEAL training offers you this great chance to kind of like reset who you are. Because whoever you were before you became a SEAL gets replaced with the person who becomes a SEAL. No one's going to be like, "Oh, there's John, like, you know, the guy who flunked out of college." It's going to be, there's John, the guy who became a Navy SEAL. And I loved this idea of, you know, SEAL training is such a meritocracy. It's actually open to lots of people. As long as you're an American citizen and you're in decent enough health. I mean, there's more to it than that, but just about anybody can go try out. And it's whoever is at the end is a Navy SEAL. And I love the idea of not only serving, because I wanted to serve, but I love the idea that the challenge and then the kind of great reset that would happen if I became a SEAL, all my stupidity with college and just kind of being a general like flunky would be replaced with something that was honorable and I could be proud of. And I also fundamentally believed that if I could get through the training itself, that I would literally evolve and, well, not literally evolve, but become the best version of myself. And I do think in many ways that was true. And so, you know, mission success.
Do you think there's a personality trait that gravitates towards that more than others? And what do you think that is?
It's not so much a personality trait as it's lots of people that show up to training have the same story roughly that I did. Yeah, I kind of screwed around, didn't really do anything out of high school, you know, screwed up college, got kicked out, didn't have a job. You know, no one in my family has a history of being in the military, just seemed cool, decided I'd go try out. Like that's like the bulk of people who make it through are that. And I will say that there's loads of people that go to SEAL training that are like super intimidating people. Like when I was in my class, there was a dude who I had like played with in Madden. Like he was a professional football player. I'm like, dude, I've played with you like on a video game. This like huge hulking like linebacker. Or there's like professional swimmers and professional rugby players and like really incredibly accomplished people. But they wash out really, really quickly. And I think, and it's something that a lot of people agree with, that the folks that come in that are like, I've done nothing with my life and this is what I want to do, I'm going to reinvent myself, they got nothing to lose because they've never done anything. If they don't make it through training, no one's going to be surprised. They're going to say, yeah, John's a ding-dong. He didn't get through training. That's not surprising. But if you're the professional swimmer, the professional the professional football player, people expect you to become a Navy SEAL. And as soon as it gets hard, the instructors focus really intensely on the dudes that are really successful before coming in. And they remind them that this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you did before. It only matters what you're doing now. And it's like a lot of people can't handle that. And also the people that have been massively successful before becoming SEALs, they're not used to failing. I'm generalizing, but a lot of people, like to become a professional baseball player, pretty good chance when you were younger, you were way better than everybody else, and it wasn't even close. And then in high school it was the same. And then in college, you were probably one of the best people on your team. I mean, even the people that get drafted last in like the MLB draft are incredible baseball players that were way better than everybody else. And so imagine if your whole life you've been the guy. You're always the best at what you did. And then you get to training and you're like, you fucking suck. You are pathetic and you're not going to make it through the training. The guys that have nothing to lose are like, well, that's probably true. I do suck. I'll just keep on going though. But the guys that are used to success, they do not handle it well. Like consistently drop out really quickly.